what we are doing, where we are, and how we feel about those things. God, I pray that you would walk with us this morning, that you would sit with us, that we would be able to find peace and solace in you. Father, as Pastor Kyle comes forward, I pray that you would speak through him, that we would hear something that we need to hear this morning.
Saying all my ways are known to you, a song that talks about the fact that God knows us and knows every step we're ever going to take. Have you ever met, though, somebody who knows you better than you think they ought to? Have you ever been in one of those situations where you're like, wait, you know more about me than I know about you? This used to happen to me all the time when we lived down in Belfast. See, Belfast is a small little community. There's only about 1,600 people total in that entire area. And it seemed like when Carla and I moved in down there, it was like at least once a week for the first year, I'd be walking down the street and someone would be, hey, you're that new pastor, right? You're Pastor Kyle. You moved into this house on this date and you're doing this and that. And I'm like, I don't even know you. I don't have any idea who you are. But yes, I am Kyle. Who are you? Tell me a little bit about yourself. And on a regular basis, I was meeting people who knew me on levels that I did not realize that they should. And oftentimes, that can be a weird sensation. Kind of like this.
A bit different from my day.
You've no idea.
Mike, can I borrow your phone? There's no signal on mine.
Well, what's wrong with the landline?
I prefer to text.
Sorry, it's in my coat.
Here. Use mine.
Oh, thank you.
It's an old friend of mine, John Watson.
Afghanistan or Iraq?
Sorry?
Which was it, Afghanistan or Iraq?
Afghanistan. Sorry, how did you...
Ah, Molly, coffee, thank you. How do you feel about the violin?
Sorry, what?
I play the violin when I'm thinking. Sometimes I don't talk for days on. And would that bother you? Potential flatmates should know the worst about each other.
But you told him about me.
Not a word.
Then who said anything about flatmates?
I did. Told Mike this morning that I must be a difficult man to find a flatmate for. Now here he is, just after lunch with an old friend, clearly just home from military service in Afghanistan. Wasn't a difficult leap.
How did you know about Afghanistan?
Got my eye on a nice little place in central London. Together we ought to be able to afford it. We'll meet there tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. Sorry, got a dash. I think I left my riding crop in the mortuary.
Is that it?
Is that what?
We've only just met. We're going to go look at a flat.
Problem?
We don't know a thing about each other. I don't know where we're meeting. I don't even know your name.
I know you're an army doctor and you've been invalided home from Afghanistan. I know you've got a brother who's worried about you, but you won't go to him for help because you don't approve of him. Possibly because he's an alcoholic, more likely because he recently walked out on his wife. And I know that your therapist thinks you're limp psychosomatic, quite correctly, I'm afraid. It's enough to be going on with, don't you think? The name's Sherlock Holmes and the address is 221B Baker Street. Okay, you've got questions.
Yeah, where are we going?
Crime scene. Next.
Who are you? What do you do?
What do you think?
I'd say private detective,
But
but the police don't go to private detectives.
I'm a consulting detective. The only one in the world that invented the job.
What does that mean?
Means when the police are out of their depth, which is always, they consult me.
The police don't consult amateurs.
When I met you for the first time yesterday, I said Afghanistan or Iraq. You looked surprised.
Yes, how did you know?
I didn't know, I saw. Haircut, the way you hold yourself, said the military. With a conversation as you entered the room.
My day.
Said trained at Bath, so army doctor, obvious. Your face is tanned. With no tan above the wrists. You've been abroad, but not sunbathing. He looks really bad when he walks, but you don't ask for a chair when you stand like you've forgotten about it. So he's partly psychosomatic. That says the original circumstances of the injury were traumatic. Wounded in action, then. Wounded in action, suntan, Afghanistan, or Iraq.
You said I had a therapist.
You've got a psychosomatic limp, of course you've got a therapist. Then there's your brother. Your phone, it's expensive, email-enabled MP3 player. If you're looking for a flat share, you wouldn't waste money on this. It's a gift, then. Scratch is not one, many over time. It's been in the same pocket as keys and coins. Man sitting next to me wouldn't treat as one luxury item like this, so it's had a previous owner. Next bit's easy, you know it already.
The engraving.
Harry Watson, clearly a family member who's given you his old phone. Not your father, this is a young man's gadget. Could be a cousin, but you're a war hero who can't find a place to live. Unlikely you've got an extended family, certainly not one you're close to, so brother it is. Now, Clara. Who's Clara? 3 cases says there's a romantic attachment. Expense the phone says wife, not girlfriend. Supposed to given it to him recently. This model's only 6 months old. Marriage in trouble then. 6 months on, he's just given it away. If she'd left him, he would have kept it. People do sentiment, but no, he wanted rid of it. He left her. He gave the phone to you. That says he wants you to stay in touch. You're looking for cheap accommodation, and you're not going to your brother for help. It says you've got problems with him. Maybe you liked his wife. Maybe you don't like his drinking.
How can you possibly know the drinking?
Shot in the dark. Good one, though. Power connection, tiny little scuff marks around the edge of it. Every night he goes to plug it in to charge, but his hands are shaking. You never see those marks on a sober man's phone, never see a drunk's without them. There you go, see, you were right.
I was right. Right about what?
The police don't consult amateurs.
That was amazing.
Sherlock Holmes, as well as being probably the fastest talker ever, also the master of deduction. He regularly meets people and tells them things about themselves that no one should possibly be able to know. And it is amazing to watch him work. If you haven't seen the show, it is a BBC show. You can find it online fairly easily. But I much prefer the novels. If you haven't read the works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, well worth the read. But today we are looking at the book of John. And we are looking at someone else who has this ability to look at someone and tell them more about themselves than he should possibly know. But before we get there, we're just going to look back at what we've seen so far in the book of John. First and foremost, John said he is writing this book so that we will know that Jesus is God. And we looked at the fact that that goes both ways. The fact that Jesus is God, but also that God is Jesus. That as we look at Jesus and how he interacts with people, how he interacts with this world, we see the heart of God through the works, the speech, and everything that Jesus says and does. We saw that Jesus came and he has been giving signs. We saw the turning water into wine at the marriage feast in Canaan. We're going to see more of these. In fact, John has 7 large signs that Jesus does to prove that he is God, to show us, to communicate to us that he is deity and that he is the Messiah. We saw that an encounter with Jesus, meeting Jesus, changes everything. We saw that with Nicodemus as he comes to Jesus and he asks his questions, and Jesus says, look, everything is about to change. Up until now, you've done things this one certain way, but now that he is here, Jesus is going to change the way everything operates, and he is here to give eternal life or abundant life to those who choose to follow him. And then last week when I was on vacation, and I very much appreciate the opportunity that you guys give me to be able to go on vacation and to not have to worry about what's going on back here. It was really funny to hear Scott talk about the fact that I was in hiding from the Dolphins' loss. I told him he missed the opportunity to tell you that I was in concussion protocol, because that's why really the Dolphins' seasons is done. We're just not going to talk about that anymore. But it was really nice to be able to watch from afar. Our tech and AV team does such a great job getting these sermons out there on the internet so that I can stay in touch, but the fact that I could be on vacation and not worry that things would fall apart here, both because of our incredible church leadership, but also just because of all of you and the way that you conduct yourselves. So thank you. Thank you for giving me the rest that I needed. But as Scott was speaking last week, he talked about this idea that John, the baptizer, said that Jesus must increase and that I must decrease, and that it's not about me. It has to be all about Jesus. And it's at the end of that story that we pick up John chapter 4. That's where we're going to be this morning. And it starts out like this. Now, when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria. Now, I just wanted to point out a couple things as we start here. One is a potential contradiction if we don't understand it. Because if you remember back last week when Scott was talking, in John chapter 3, it said that Jesus was baptizing. Now we go on to the next chapter and it says Jesus himself did not baptize. Is the Bible contradicting here? No, clearly not. There are two ways to look at John 4, verse 2 here. Although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples. The first one that I found this week as I was looking into it is this idea that Jesus did not baptize anyone except for his disciples. He baptized the disciples and nobody else. I can understand how people get there. I don't think that's what John's saying here. I think it's the other way. It's that Jesus himself was not doing any of the baptizing. That when Jesus and his disciples were baptizing, he allowed his disciples to be the ones doing the baptizing rather than himself. Which is why then in chapter 3, it's saying that Jesus is baptizing. What it means is that Jesus and his followers are baptizing, specifically his disciples. And when the Pharisees hear that Jesus' disciples are baptizing, they're going to attribute that to him, to Jesus. And John wants to make the point, Jesus never baptized anybody. Why does John go out of his way to make this point? I think it's this. Because John is writing this after the fact. John is writing this knowing where this is going. John is writing this knowing what the end of the story looks like. He knows that there is coming a day where there is going to be this thing called church. And that church is going to be made up of believers. Believers are people. And we as people have this tendency to try to categorize ourselves and try to compare ourselves to one another. And what I think John is already doing at this point in his gospel is saying, look, Jesus never baptized anybody. Because if Jesus had baptized somebody, then there's a chance that when you get to that church thing that's coming next, someone's like, who baptized you? Jesus baptized me. I'm a better Christian than all of you because I got baptized by Jesus. And John's already saying, no, knock that off. Jesus never baptized anybody. Jesus allowed his disciples to baptize on his behalf because we need to be focused on him, not who dunked us under some water. That's not the important bit. So now he's continuing this story. He says, look, he left Judea and he departed again for Galilee. He had to pass through Samaria. If you don't know your Israelite geography, that's okay. I've got a map. If you look down here on the bottom, you see Judea. Why was Jesus in Judea? Jesus was in Judea because that's where Jerusalem is. He was there for the festival. He is now going back to Galilee, which is where he would have called home. Directly between Judea and Galilee is Samaria. It stretches the entire way across from the Jordan River. If you remember from the crossing of Jordan back in Joshua, you've got the Dead Sea to the south, the Sea of Galilee to the north, and from all the way from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, that is Samaria. He literally could not avoid Samaria. He had to go through Samaria if he was going to get home. So along this journey, he comes to this town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from the journey, was sitting beside the well. And it came about the 6th hour, and a woman from Samaria came to draw water. I have heard a lot of preachers take some very interesting direction with this verse, or with these verses. They really like to spend a lot of time speculating on this woman, speculating on her history, speculating on her past, speculating as to who she is, because why would she be coming out at the 6th hour? Why does it seem like she's coming out alone? Why does she come out, and why does Jesus choose to talk to her? I have heard preachers go so far as to suggest that this woman must be a prostitute because why else would she be coming out in the middle of the day? Or at very least, she's a woman of ill repute, someone who is not a good person. But I challenge you, stay to what the verses say, not what they don't. This story is not about the woman. John did not write his gospel to tell us anything about this woman. The point of this passage is to tell us something about Jesus. So what we know about this woman is that she is a woman from Samaria, the land that Jesus is walking through, the land that he is in. It is a woman from Samaria who has come to draw water. What do we see next? It says, Jesus says to her, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. And the Samaritan woman says to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." And here is the important bit. Because as she comes out, Jesus asks her for a favor. He asks her to give him a drink of water. This would have been something that a friend would do for a friend. This is something that people would do for each other as an act of kindness. It was Jesus asking her to do something for him as a favor. And this surprises her. I don't think it's because of her terrible past and her history, and I think it just surprises her because, one, Jews and Samaritans had nothing to do with each other. The idea of asking a Samaritan for a favor would have been so beneath your average Jewish man that he never would have accepted food or drink or hospitality or anything from someone who was a Samaritan because of the rift that existed between Jews and Samaritans. So she's just surprised on that level. Look, our interactions with Jews are hostile at best. I wouldn't expect this guy to speak to me, much less ask me for a favor, ask me for hospitality. But beyond that, he's speaking to a woman in public. In this day and age, that would have been unheard of. So for this teacher, this rabbi, this highly popular, this celebrity of a person to ask this woman who is his enemy by birth to show him grace, to show him hospitality is unheard of, and she is shocked by it. And she asks, "How is it that you're going to ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" And Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." This is the point of the story. This is the point that John is trying to draw out. This is the point that John is trying to make. And you'll see it in a minute when he delivers his punchline, when he gets to the important answer to this question. John, remember, the whole point of John's book is to establish for us who is Jesus. That's why he's writing. That's why he spends so much time establishing the deity of Christ in the first chapters. By the time you get to John chapter 20, he flat out says, the reason I'm writing this book is to tell you who this Jesus is. That's the point. So here he is posing the question. It's not about who this woman is, it is about who is it who is asking her for a drink. He's saying, if you knew how great our God is, if you knew about the gift that God was giving you, you would have asked me for the drink, and I would have given you living water. And if that doesn't make sense to you, you are in good company, because it doesn't make sense to her either. Her very next question is, the woman says, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with. The well is deep. Where are you going to get this living water you speak of? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us this well. He drank from it himself, and as did his sons and his livestock." Jesus is not talking about water, but she doesn't know that. We know that because we have read to the end of the story, but in her mind, this is a crazy person. He's talking about water that's alive. What does that mean? She goes immediately to, wait, are you trying to tell me that you, Jesus, this man, this Jewish rabbi, is greater than Jacob? I mean, do you know what you're saying? Jacob, he was one of our forefathers. He came out here in the middle of the desert and he found water. That's how cool Jacob was. He found enough water that he was able to give himself water to drink. He was able to give his sons and his livestock water to drink. Our Jacob, son of Isaac, son of Abraham, he was really stinking cool. Are you trying to tell me that you are better than him? You can't even provide water for yourself. The answer to this question, we now know, is yes. That is exactly what Jesus is trying to tell her, is I am greater than your father Jacob. I am greater than Isaac. I am greater than Abraham. Yes, I am greater. Jesus says to her, everyone who drinks of this water, they're going to be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I give him, they'll never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. And the woman says to him, Sir, give me this water, so I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water. She's still not getting it. But Jesus is not talking about a physical drink of water. What he's saying is that when we place our faith in Jesus, when we choose to become followers of Jesus and go where he wants and do what he calls us to do, he will provide every need you ever have. Now, does that mean he will give you everything you ever want? No. Does that mean you will never be thirsty again because you will have all the water you ever need, all the food you ever need, all the clothing, all the housing, all the cars, all the money, all the things? No. What it means is that he knows you well enough and he loves you enough that he will give you everything that you actually need. And if ever he determines that your need is not food and water, but rather to be at home with him in heaven, he'll supply that need too. But this woman is still stuck on the physical need of water. So she says, give me this water so I never have to come back here. I never have to walk back to this well. I never have to go through the effort of getting the water out of this well. Again, give me this water. So Jesus says to her, go, call your husband and come here. And the woman answered him, I have no husband. And Jesus says to her, you are right in saying I have no husband. For you have had 5 husbands. The one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true. And I think this is where people get caught up in trying to explain why she's at the well at this time of day and why they get it in their head that she is a woman of ill repute is because she has had 5 husbands. The interesting thing is that culturally, it doesn't actually tell us anything about how those 5 husbands have come into her life. At least mostly because it's not the point of the story, but also because culturally this would have happened to a number of women in this period in time. We see it in the story of Ruth. She has at least 2 husbands because her first husband dies and then she has a kinsman redeemer. We see a story later on in the Gospels where the Pharisees come to Jesus and say, okay, so this woman marries a man, husband dies, she marries his brother, he dies, marries the brother, he dies, and they go four deep for her. She's had 4 husbands, they've all died, they want to know who she's going to be married to in heaven. Again, they're missing the point too. But if she was in the process of gaining a 5th husband, she would have been in the same position as this woman at the well who has had 5 husbands and is currently working on number 6. It doesn't necessarily mean there is anything wrong with this woman. But even if it did, it's not about her. In fact, Jesus here at the end commends her for actually telling the truth. For saying, I am not actually connected to any man. He's like, look, you have spoken truthfully with me. Jesus has no problem with what she has said to him. But what he has told her is something that he had no business knowing. How could he possibly have known this about her? This is John's point. He knew things about this woman that no one else would have been able to know. And she responds exactly the same. She says, so the woman says to him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Her reaction to that is not, oh my goodness, I'm so ashamed. It's, oh my goodness, who are you? Like, you know things, yeah. Like, this is the predecessor of Sherlock Holmes. Like, how do you possibly know that about me? You must be a prophet, someone sent from God to speak on God's behalf. You knowing that about me is amazing. And now she's got questions. Now she wants to know more from this guy that she's talking to. She said, our fathers worshipped on this mountain. But you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship, you being the Jewish people. And Jesus said to her, woman, believe me. Remember, that woman is not a derogatory term. Same as when he spoke to his mother back in chapter 2. This is a term of respect. Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know. For salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. And through all of this conversation feels a lot like Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus in the previous chapter. Jesus is saying things that are deep and profound and confusing as all get out. And the person he's talking to isn't getting it. But what Jesus is saying is, look, there is a time coming where everything you've known up till now is going to change. And everything that's going to come next is going to look entirely different. With Nicodemus, it was all about the law. And here, he's talking about a conflict that exists between the Jews and the Samaritans, where they disagree as to where it is that God has called them to worship. The Jews have said, in Jerusalem, this is the list of rules, here's everything you need to do in order to worship God. And the Samaritans have said, nope, we're going to worship here on this mountain over here, and that's where we're going to worship God. And she's like, we've been fighting about this for generations. We have hated each other for generations because we disagree on our traditions of worship. And Jesus meets her here and says, look, up until now, salvation has come through the Jews. Up until now, God has prescribed exactly how we should worship. There was a list of rules. There was a list of things that you had to do. And yes, the place to worship was Jerusalem. He says, but the hour is coming. There is a time coming where that's going to change. And in fact, he says, it's here. That hour, that time where everything is going to change is now. And moving forward from this moment that has come in John chapter 4, he's saying from this point forward, it's not gonna matter where you worship. It's not even gonna matter how you worship. What he's saying is you're going to need to worship in spirit and in truth. What's gonna matter is who you worship. Because God is spirit. God is spirit, and that because that's who we're worshiping, the Spirit of God, we need to worship in spirit. In our hearts, we need to be poured out to God in worship, in spirit and in truth. And what's cool is this woman starts to get it. My batteries are dead, but there we go. So the woman says to him, I know that Messiah is coming. Because he's saying there's an hour coming where everything's going to change, and she knows what he's talking about. She goes, I know there's an hour coming where the Messiah is going to show up, and he who is called the Christ, and that everything will change. And when he comes, he will make it clear. He will tell us all things. He is going to tell us how to worship. He's going to reconnect us with our God. He's going to do everything we need him to do. And Jesus says to her, I who speak to you am he. This is the answer to the question all the way back at the beginning of this conversation, where he says, if you had any idea who you were talking to, you would have asked him for water and he would have given it to you. You would have asked him for the hospitality and he would have given you more than you could have ever expected. Because she knows that the Messiah is coming, and what he is telling her is that hour that you've been waiting for is here. I who speak to you am that Messiah. I am God. Jesus is declaring to her that he is more than just a Jewish rabbi. He is the God of the universe. He is the Messiah. He is more than a prophet. He is a God. Just then the disciples come back. Worst timing. They marveled that he was talking with a woman, but no one says to him, Who do you seek? Or why are you talking to her? So the woman left her water jar and went away into town and said to the people, come, see a man who told me everything, all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? And they went out of town and were coming to him. So the disciples come back. They went away to get food. They're coming back with that food. They see him talking with a woman. They're like, that's weird. He shouldn't be talking to her. That's just odd. But no one at this point has the nerve to question Jesus anymore. Like, they're already learning. They've walked with him for a couple weeks now. They're like, yeah, he's just being Jesus. Let him be Jesus. But the woman, she is fascinated by what Jesus has just told her. She is marveling at what Jesus has just done. And so she gets up, leaves everything that she has, drawing very obvious parallels to fishers' nets, where they got up, left their fishers' nets. She gets up, leaves her water jar, and just like the disciples go and tell their brothers, hey, come see this man, this woman leaves her jar, walks back into the town and starts telling everybody, hey, come and see a man who told me everything that I ever did. There are obvious parallels here that John is drawing, that as people interact with Jesus, as they're coming in contact with Jesus, their first reaction is, I got to tell somebody about this guy. And they get up, and she goes, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? Is this the Messiah we've been waiting for? And they leave town, and they start coming to him. In the meantime, the disciples are urging him, saying, Rabbi, teacher, eat. But he says to them, I have food to eat that you do not know about. So the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him something to eat? He's like, look, I don't need food right now. There's something more important going on. Jesus says to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Do you not say, there are yet 4 months and then comes the harvest? Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes, see the fields are white for harvest. Already the one who reaps is receiving wages, gathering fruit for eternal life, so that the sower and the reaper may rejoice together. For here the saying holds true, one sows, another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you did not labor. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor. What Jesus is just telling his disciples is, look, get your eyes up. Stop being so focused on the temporal. Stop being so focused on what food you're going to put in your mouth, or what water you're going to drink, or how you're going to get clothes or shelter, or these things. Just get your eyes up off of your immediate tangible needs and pay attention, because there is something incredibly significant going on here. That woman I was just talking to, he says, look, she is bringing people out of the city to come meet Jesus. You are my followers. Pay attention. Cool stuff is about to happen. You've done nothing, and yet you're going to have an interaction with an entire city who is now interested in what this Jesus has to offer. He says, pay attention. Because many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony, which was that he told me all that I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they asked him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his word. And then they said to the woman, it is no longer because of what you said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this indeed is the Savior of the world. Don't miss the significance, the importance here, because Jesus is telling the disciples, pay attention. Big things are happening. I talked to one woman at a well. I told her something about her that she didn't think I would know. She got up, she went back into town. She told all her friends that they needed to come meet this Jesus guy. They came out to meet this Jesus guy. And now, in the middle of a Jewish rabbi's ministry, he is repairing a generational rift with Samaritans who hated Jews. Samaritans who Jews hated. Jesus is already saying, look, that's done. We are now going to worship a unified God together in a way we have not been able to do for hundreds of years. Jesus is repairing cultural rifts in ways that nobody could have seen coming, and he's just telling the disciples, pay attention. This is big. We are changing the world here. We are bringing peace and love where there was only hate. And it's all because of this guy named Jesus. This guy named Jesus who met a woman at a well and made her this offer. Come as you are and see. Come, you know your whole past. You know everything that is there, and I still love you. Come as you are and see what Jesus has to offer. And this is the same offer being given today. Because as we start looking at the significance of this, the biggest thing about Jesus is that he knows everything about you. Jesus knows not just how many times you've been married, not just how many people you've interacted with in your life. Jesus knows everything. That thing that no one knows about you, that you have kept deep inside, that nobody can ever know, Jesus knows. He 100% knows. And yet, Jesus chose you. Jesus chose you to say that I love you. Not in ignorance, not because you hid that part and you presented yourself as this great person. Jesus knows everything about you and is still choosing to say to you, I want to have a relationship. I want to have a friendship with you. I want to make everything right between you and God so that you and my Father can have a relationship, so that you can be my brother, you can be my sister, you can be everything that God designed you to be. And yes, I know about that thing, and I'm making you this offer anyway. Those of us who know that, those of us who have accepted that, those of us who have come to a point in our lives where we have surrendered and said, man, if that's the offer, I'm in. God, you can have everything you can do. For those of us who've already made that decision, who can you tell? Because one of the things that we see over and over again in the Gospel of John is that as we have that interaction with Jesus, as we realize the overwhelming truth that the God of the universe knows everything about us and chose to love us anyway, is that we then should be so excited by that we should want to tell somebody. Whether it was the disciples, whether it's this woman at the well, their first reaction is to go say, come and see this man who told me everything about myself. Come and see this man who knew me when I was sitting under the fig tree. Come and see this man who called me to follow him. So I left my nets and I followed him. Who is that for you? And I don't ask this in the ethereal realm of, is there a person out there? I mean specifically, think about it right now. Who in your life could benefit from hearing that the God of the universe knows the worst thing they ever did, but loves them anyway and wants to have a relationship with them? I bet there is somebody in your life right now who needs to hear that. Maybe it's you, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend. But my bet is that God did not leave you with no one who falls into that category. So who can you tell? And you don't have to do that alone. Because many of us feel very uncomfortable having that conversation. So here's my invitation to you. We as a church want to partner with you in this. So oftentimes we get into that conversation and we are afraid to say things because we're afraid we don't have the answers. We're afraid that someone's going to ask a question and we're going to be lost and we're going to look stupid and we're going to make things worse. That's okay. You don't need to know the answers. John is teaching us the phrase that we need to have ready. Come and see. We as a church need to be partnered together so that when you run into somebody that you have made this offer to and they have a question that you don't understand, all you have to say is, I don't know. Come and see. We have church on Sunday. We have small groups. We have youth group. We have places where you can say, come and see. Come and see what it's like to do life with a group of people who actually care about you. Come and see what it's like to see lives changed by the God of the universe. Come and see what it can be like for you. So as you pray, as you think, what am I going to do with this story about this woman at a well some 2,000 years ago? It's to think, who is that person for you? who can you tell and who can you say, come as you are and see the man who knew everything about me and chose to have a relationship anyway? God, I thank you for the uncomfortable yet amazing truth that you know everything I have ever done and chose to love me anyway. God, I pray that as we go out this week, you will make it very, very clear who it is that you are calling us to speak to. And I pray that we will be obedient and do the thing you are calling us to do in your Son's name. Amen.